Hello, I'm Chip Rogers and welcome to the AAHOA Educational Experience. We thank you for being with us today. We have a very special show for you. We're going to be talking about a lot of issues dealing with not only the industry, but how you comply with the ADA. And we'll talk a lot about that. But in our first segment of our first show, we have some very special guests that I want to introduce to you. First, sitting to my right, Marian, who is the director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. Marian, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And J.King, Senior Vice President with the United Spinal Association. Kleo, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And for this segment, we have a couple of special guests, Brosi with Canine Companions for Independence, and Shane is also here. And we thank all of you for being here. But first I want to start with you, Jeff, and want to talk about Shane and what Shane does and what Shane can do and how people need to react to Shane and you as well. So first of all, tell us a little bit about Shane.
Well, Shane's a service dog from Canine Companions for Independence. He's a black lab. He's about 2.5 years old. I received him about a year ago. He's a service dog that helps me open and close doors, picks things up. He pulls me when I'm tired. And more than anything, he's a companionship. He definitely he breaks a lot of barriers for people with disabilities. He's able to make people feel more comfortable, more warming when they see the dog, because it's not just the person in a wheelchair, it's more of a partnership with the person in the wheelchair and the dog. It allows for more conversations, to allow people to be more inviting with someone with a disability.
So when someone, and everybody of course has seen companion animals, but I don't think people necessarily see them in their everyday routine like you would.
Yes.
So how does, what are kind of the rules for people interacting with companion animals who don't know?
Well, technically you're not supposed to pet the dog when the dog is working, just because it can affect the way the dog actually works. It can take him away from his actual commands. So when he's listening to me do something, if somebody's petting him or calling attention to him, it will take him away from actually doing what I need him to do. So they always say to not have the dog be pet while he isn't working. The dog is also a pet when he's outside of his duties, when he's off of work. So when he does get home, he acts like a regular pet and people can play with him and pet him and everything else.
So when he's not working, he's just man's best friend, and when he's working, he's doing his job.
He's all business.
Okay. Now, I see black labs that are companion animals. I see German shepherds that are companion animals. Obviously, you need a dog that has some strength. But is there any particular breed that's better than not, or is there a list of breeds that are acceptable as companion animals?
Well, Canine Companions did some research, and over the few years, they've always decided to go with black labs, yellow labs, and golden retrievers. They feel that those dogs are more ideal for everyday use of a service dog.
Okay. And how long does it take for a service animal to be trained? I mean, obviously you don't just take them from being a puppy and then, you know, a few months later. I mean, there seems like there would have to be a lot of training to go into this.
They usually start puppy raising 8 weeks. After the first 8 weeks, it goes to a puppy raiser. Then the puppy raiser holds the dog till roughly around about a year, and then they do 6 months worth of intense training before they place them with somebody with a disability.
And that, it seems to me that would be somewhat of an expensive process too. I mean, this is obviously a lot of time that goes into bringing a dog from puppy to being a service animal.
Yes. They say the value of the dog, by the time it goes through the full training, puppy raising and everything else, is roughly around $60,000.
Wow. That is an expensive dog. So, all right, service animal needs in a hotel. So obviously Shane goes with you everywhere you go.
Yes.
And if you go to a hotel, what are the needs of both yourself and Shane in that situation?
Well, the first thing is just having enough room to be able to get around. Because now, getting around alone just in the wheelchair is difficult. Now being able to get around with the wheelchair and the dog is definitely a big issue, especially in hotels. The other thing is being able to have somewhere where you can toilet your dog. Being able to somewhere you can take the dog out to go to the bathroom. It's always difficult to have an area for the dog to run, but at least if they can get out, get a little bit of exercise, and use the bathroom, that's key. The other thing is when you get there is that people are understanding that you are coming with a service dog and they are aware of what is the needs for you and that you do have an accessible room when you get up there. And just be accepting of knowing that we are coming in with the dog, and it's not that when you first get there they're thrown off that a dog is coming, because it's not the norm.
Right, and I guess for everybody, but in particular those who operate hotels, that you know you have just a normal dog who, as a hotel owner, you're going to be concerned, what is this animal going to do to my property?
Yes.
But these service animals are so highly trained, that should not be a concern for the hotel owner, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The only issue you could have is some hair on the floor. Maybe
right.
That's it. But otherwise, they're probably better guests than most humans.
I was going to say, I would imagine most hotel owners, if all they had to deal with was a little hair on the floor, would be real happy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Commands. What are the type of commands that Shane has to be taught to react from you?
Well, the first command that I use the most is a retrieve command. That's where he picks things up, because unfortunately I drop things all the time due to my hand function. So he retrieves everything for me, from dropping car keys on the street to dropping my TV remote control to dropping a telephone that falls out of the bed. The other commands he knows that I use the most is a pull command, where he, on his harness, he has a strap that I can strap my hand into, that he'll pull the wheelchair when I'm extremely tired. The other command he has is a lot of, you'll see even in hotels, that they have the push button for the doors to open up. He knows how to walk up and use his nose to open the doors for me, so I don't have to hit the push buttons. He can open doors that have French door handles that will allow him to be able to get up and use his paws to open the doors. Those are the commands that I use the most for him, with him.
And how long will Shane be with you?
They say that the expectancy of him to work is roughly till he's about 10, and then they try to retire the dog. That's not always the case. That's kind of a rough estimate. Usually between 10 and 11 is when they retire the dog, and then he becomes a pet, no longer a service dog.
What are the challenges for, you live in Manhattan?
In Queens.
In Queens.
Yes.
What are the challenges for a service animal in a highly densely populated area like New York City, as opposed to a companion animal that may be in a rural setting?
Well, some of the things are, when an area is extremely busy, you got to go in and out. So it's like when you're going through a highly dense area with a lot of foot traffic, when you're wheeling, they don't see the dog, especially him being black and him being low. So they always bump into the dog, they fall over the leash. So I try to keep him as tight against to the wheelchair as possible. So when we are moving, we're kind of sleek and out of the way. But there are issues that he takes more of abuse than I do just because they don't see him.
Right. And at night, he's a black lab. At night, that's got to be an issue as well, right?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I actually started getting a collar that's lights up. Actually makes it a lot easier.
How did he react to that?
He's fine. Nothing bothers him.
So tell us some things about Shane and about service animals that the average person doesn't know and that they should know.
Well, one, you can see the cost of them, which is unbelievable. Two, how well trained they are. The amount of things he does and the companionship alone with somebody with a disability, when they first either are born with a disability or if they develop that disability over time, to be able to have the companionship of the dog that can do the service of what you need to make your life easier. But just to have that love and affection is, words can't describe.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
He's, I guess, with you all day long?
All day.
And so when you get up in the morning, he's raring to go.
Ready to go. Especially when you put the vest on, he knows it's all business.
He knows that's work time, right?
Exactly.
All right, anything else we need to know about Canine Companions for Independence?
No, just that they're a great nonprofit organization that are really, they help. The biggest thing they're pushing now is veterans coming back after war and stuff that come back with disabilities. They're a huge advocate that initially people don't want to be part of because they're very, a lot of people that go into military are very stronger and tough, and then all of a sudden they come back out and they have a disability and they're very hard to get back into society, and these dogs really help them start to realize that life is okay and we can get back into society as best as possible.
Well, that is wonderful. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for introducing us to Shane. This has been quite a learning experience. So
thank you very much.
Well, we've got to take a quick time out, and we'll be back to talk a lot more about these type issues on the AAHOA Educational Experience right after this. Welcome back, and thanks for being with us again today on the AAHOA Educational Experience. As I mentioned earlier, my guests today include Marian, Director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center, and also J.King with the United Spinal Association. Marian, let's talk first of all about the ADA. What does that mean? Because for most people, you have so many acronyms that you can lose control or lose knowledge of what they all mean. But tell us what the ADA is, because in the legal sense, and it's something you deal with every day, people remember it, but this is a law, and it's a civil rights law, correct?
Mm-hmm. It's called the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it was passed in 1990, and it was designed to assure that there are civil rights for people with disabilities. It was developed because a lot of people with disabilities weren't able to go to restaurants, weren't able to sleep in hotels, weren't able to go to the post office or go to the grocery store, do things that all of us do on a daily basis without thinking about. And people with disabilities covered under law are not only people like myself in a wheelchair, but it'd be somebody who is deaf or blind, somebody with a psychiatric disability, or somebody with mental illness. People with all different kinds of disabilities are covered under the ADA. You mentioned it was a civil rights law, and that's really, really important. Some people see it as a law that talks about employment or a law that talks about a building code. And it's really much more than that. It's really about the basic civil rights of people with disabilities to participate in society.
And so this passed in became the law in 1990. That's the first George Bush administration.
Right.
But when you create a law of this magnitude, this was a significant milestone piece of legislation. Obviously, over time, those laws need to be changed. They need to be updated. Have we seen revisions to this that have brought us from what started as a good idea and made it even better as time went by?
Absolutely. The law covers essentially 5 separate topic areas. It covers employment, state and local government, places of public accommodation, and a hotel would be an example of that. A public accommodation means essentially anywhere that the public goes to. It covers telecommunications, and it covers transportation. And up until about 3 years ago, the law had been pretty static. It had changed some with the Supreme Court decisions on employment and some court cases, but not dramatically. Well, the employment one was pretty dramatic, but in the last 3 years, we've had huge revisions, both employment and in now the new regulations from the Department of Justice that talk about physical structures, it talks about recreational facilities, some within a hotel. It talks about service animals. All kinds of things are now been changed. And some of those final regulations go into effect March 15th.
So Kleo, you're an attorney, correct?
Correct.
So if someone feels as if a provider of any type is not in compliance with the ADA, what is the process for bringing them into compliance? Whether it's a hotel owner, a restaurant, anybody, how do you, if I have a claim against someone for not being in compliance with the law, is there a private right of action for the individual?
Yes, there is. They can either complain to the United States Department of Justice, or they can go right into federal court and file a complaint.
And so, which is a better route to go? So many people say, let's try not to go to court. That's costly for everybody and time consuming. But is that the better route for getting the issue resolved, or does the Justice Department do a good job of it?
I think for individual cases, maybe against one entity, say your local restaurant, first course of action would be to approach the owner of the restaurant and educate them and try to get them to make changes, and then if they didn't, filing a private lawsuit would be the most expeditious way to remedy that instance.
In your experience, do business owners typically respond prior to having to file a lawsuit?
Some have removed barriers. Like Marian said, the law's been in effect since 1990, and there was a provision where an existing facility had to remove barriers and make their programs and their goods accessible to people with disabilities, and many have and have done a good job of doing that, and others may not have known about the law or didn't think it applied to them, and once someone educates them and lets them know, they'll remove barriers. And then there are business owners who turn a blind eye to it and don't do anything, and the only course of action would be to file a lawsuit or call Department of Justice and see if they're willing to take an action against them.
Marian, impact on hotel owners. ADA obviously is a law that has a pretty significant impact on hotel owners. You know, again, this law has been in place since 1990, so we're on another revision of it now. Mm-hmm. So how has that relationship been with the hotel owners getting in compliance?
Well, I think right now a lot of hotel owners are scrambling. There's been some regulations that went into place about 18 months ago, and hotel owners are now waking up and realizing that there's a lot of things that they need to do. If they complied with the law when the regulations came in effect in 1991, they're in good shape. And as they then modify or alter their hotels, they'll be able to bring them up to the new 2010 standards. But a lot of folks probably probably didn't comply with 1991 to begin with. So they've got a lot of work to do. There's new pool regulations that talk about how to make a pool accessible. There's new regulations on how to make a fitness center accessible. So there's some big challenges ahead for hotel owners, and the best thing to do is to become educated, watching this series, calling information centers like the ADA National Network, where they can get free advice on how to become accessible, and doing a simple survey. There's a tool that's going to be released by American Hotel and Lodging Association, designed just for hotel owners, that will help them walk through their property and determine if their building is in compliance and what they may need to do to assure they have compliance.
Well, we've had, obviously, since the creation of the law, thousands and thousands of hotels that have been constructed. I mean, it would seem to me that the easiest way to do this would be to have everything you need to be compliant built into the construction process from the beginning, because if you don't, and then you have to come back, it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 times more expensive. I mean, are we seeing, at least in the construction process, the design and construction of hotels, that they're taking these things into account prior to getting to the point of opening the doors and realizing they're not in compliance?
Both Kleo and I can talk about that. You know, you can look at great plans, and execution of those great plans sometimes goes awry. And so even though it looks good on paper, a lot of times something as small as an inch or two can make a huge difference in its usability. So even brand new construction, rarely is it perfect, and it does take some diligence.
Right. I have a good story about a hotel. A manager I knew asked me to come by and look at the brand new hotel, was really excited to show me all the accessible rooms. And we get to the room with the roll-in shower, all excited. I go in the bathroom first, and she hears, because there's a 4-inch lip on the roll-in shower. The plans showed it as a roll-in shower, no lip, but the person putting in the tiling thought it was an error on the plans, and that all showers have lips so the water doesn't come out, and built it that way. And of course he had to come back in and fix it. So things, even though all the planning was correct, things do happen in the construction process. Yeah,
that had not thought about that. I mean, you could have the perfect plan, but like anything in life, if it's not properly executed, it doesn't work out. So where in the so I mean, have standards been established for construction in the design and construction of the hotel industry, to where at least your large international companies, they know right from the get-go, we've got to design it and build it like this? I mean, I would think that they probably have a better standard of compliance just because they're building so many hotels.
Well, if you have one architect who's doing hotel after hotel after hotel, they certainly know. For smaller venues that are doing independent construction work with separate architects, it would behoove them to, work with an architect and designers who work in the hotel industry and are really well aware, because it can be very daunting if they're not very good architects building inaccessible features.
We've run out of time for this segment, but we are going to be back with our next show and talk about this subject again, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the impact on hotels, and other topics surrounding that. And we certainly thank you for being with us. Again, my guest this week, J.King with the United Spinal Association. Kleo, thank you for being with us. And Marian, the director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. I'm Chip Rogers, and you can always contact me via email, chip@ahoa.com. That's chip@ahoa.com. We'll see you again next week.